Hello, it is I, Solar Cross, and today...
Oi, boss!
What do you want, Orky boy? Can you not see I am filming?
Yes, boss. But you is making the wrong video.
What do you mean?
You know how you made me when you made all them sneaky commando kits?
Yes?
I is a shooter boy. One shooter boy. On his Todd. You made a horde of slugger boys. You made a goth boss. And a mob of commandos. And then you made a mech boy. But you still have not made me any shooter boy mates. I can't go into a fight on my own now, can I? You need to make some shooter boys to back me up.
Fair point. So, you want me to make some shooter boys for you in this video?
Yes, boss.
Alrighty then. Hello. This is I, Solar Cross, and today we are going to make some shooter boys. Alright, let's bash out some boys to keep this cheeky chap company. You may remember him from the third episode of Projekt Mork, where we met our Blood Axe commandos. He was never meant to be one of them. He is kitted out wrong to be a commando. But I happened to paint him at the same time, so he was bundled in with them in that video. I could not put him in with the slugger boys I started with either, since he is a shooter boy. He is my only shooter boy so far, which means if he is to get some buddies, we will have to make them for him. The goal today then will be to make 9 or 10 or perhaps 11 shooter boys, and for bonus points, a knob and a mech to join the squad too. I just recently bagged these Cromlech Africa Core style orc torsos from eBay, so why not use them to help make these boys into Blood Axe Shoota Boyz? Step 1. The concept. Before I start slapping bits together, let me lay out the concept for this squad. I see them as Blood Axe Shoota Boyz with their own truck, whose job is to race into enemy territory to grab objectives and then camp on them, shooting up all the enemy positions near them. To keep their truck running, they will have a mech, and to keep the boys in line, they will have a knob. The mech will be armed with a combi scorcher, and the knob will be kitted out for shooting with a twin-linked shooter and a boss pole. In total, the mob will number 13. 1 mech, 1 knob, our lonely shooter boy, and 10 other boys, one of whom will be given a big shooter. That is one too many for a truck, but we don't have to field all of them on the table, and having the extra boy allows us to drop a mech or a knob as we want. Of course, they will be blood axes, no nonsense, scarred up vets who get the job done as professionally as can be expected from orcs. As you may know from if you've watched my other videos, I have already done the mech that was done in the last episode of Projekt Mork. See the link here. Step 2. Forage for bits. Now that I have the concept nailed, I have a good old rummage through my pile of shame to find all the bits I might use to make this project happen. The pile of shame really is a hoard of opportunity, and the more shameful it is, the more chances of good finds for custom kit bashing. Having had a good go through my bits box for anything I can use for this project, I set them aside in their own container for later. And now I have them on the table, as you can see here, ready for cleaning up. Aside from the Cromlech torsos I've already pulled out, I had in mind any bits that would help to make them look particularly like Blood Axe Orc Boys. So we've got a couple of bits for the boss pole. One of them is from the knobs kit, I'm pretty sure, and that is an actual Blood Axe boss pole topper. And I found this other one, which I'm not sure what kit it's from, but it looks like a shooter, and that will be on his boss pole too, so that we all know that his squad are Blood Axe Shoota Boyz. Besides that, I made a particular point of sourcing helmeted orc heads, because I believe blood axes would be tactical enough and sensible enough to wear a helmet on the battlefield. Step 3. Prepare bits for assembly. Now that we have all the bits we need, it is time to clean them up and prepare them for assembly. This will involve snipping them from the sprue, filing and scraping off mold lines, and drilling holes for where we will want to pin them for extra strength. I will not go into great depth about preparing bits at this time, but if I ever do a video on that, I will link to it here. We also modify our bits at this time too. I will do quite a lot of that in this build, because the helmets I have will need some modifying, as I do not want them to have horns or fur trim, so I cut all that off. Another major modification I will do is sculpt on short sleeves to all the arms that will be joining to the cromlech torsos, as I believe the design of the cromlech torsos does suggest having sleeves. The only other serious modification I do is to cut down a lizardman spear and a piece from a shooter to use to build a boss pole for our knob. Step 4. Dry fit and play around. Now we take our prepared bits and we just put them together without glue or with something temporary like blue tack, just to see that everything fits together nicely. This is especially important when kit bashing, because quite often we are using bits from kits that weren't designed to work together, such as this Spellcrow head and this metal GW knobs body. You see the Spellcrow head is designed to fit a ball type neck joint, whereas the knobs body's got a flat plane for joining to a head. So I'm having to fill in the socket part of the Spellcrow head to make it fit flush. A nice example of dry fitting or making a temporary build for kitbashed parts was in my last video, which showed the build of a combi scorcher for a mech boy. You can see that video, there'll be a link here. It is at this stage that we want to firm up our ideas about whether or not we will be building the model in sub-assemblies. A sub-assembly is where we only partially build the model, leaving off some parts so that they may be painted a bit easier. For example, with this build, the Shooter Boys have a two-handed grip on their weapons, with the weapon across their chest in most cases. It'll be considerably easier to paint the chest and the rear side of the gun if I leave off the gun until after, or at least a later stage of painting. So we'll assemble the boys all the way up to the point where they need their weapon arm or weapon to go on, and we will leave that off, and then begin painting. And then once enough of the chest and gun is painted, we can then put that on. Step 5. Begin assembly. When it comes to finally gluing our bits together, I like to start from the bottom and work my way up. So I get the legs onto a base, and then the torso onto the legs, and then I build put a head on the torso. After I've done the head, it's time to put on the arms. Of course, we will be leaving off one arm, or at least the gun, for ease of painting for most of the models. We are working with 3 different materials in this project: metal, resin and plastic. So we will be quite careful to use the right glue for the right bits. Plastic to plastic obviously will have poly cement, plastics glue as it's sometimes called, although technically it's not a glue. And obviously for anything which is involving resin or metal, even when it's joined to plastic, we will be using super glue. Step 5.5, basing texture. I'll just mention this quickly before we get on to the next proper step. Before I go on to priming, I like to get some texture down on the base, particularly for the plain plastic bases. A word about bases. Generally I make models for the wargaming table, so I'm not overly fussy about fancy bases. But I do like to have a little bit of a texture down, and that's what I do at this stage, just after assembly, but before priming. In another video I might go in a bit more depth about how to do it, or how I do it, and if I do, there'll be a link here. Step 6, bath time. After all this time, cutting, scraping, filing, sculpting, gluing, these boys will be a bit mucky. So before priming, I plop them into the basin for a bit of a scrub. Nothing fancy, just water and mild soap. Disclaimer, the models present in this clip may not in fact be the Shooter Boyz mentioned in this video due to not having film of that. So these are probably some other models. Step 7, prime and zenithal. Now that everything's nice and clean and almost fully assembled, I prepare for painting by priming black. I just use a cheap old Chinese airbrush and some Vallejo surface primer. As you can see, I have not assembled the arms. One thing to note while priming is because some pieces are not yet assembled, I mask off where they should join using little blobs of blue tack. This is because I don't want primer on those parts, as it will interfere with the bond. When it's all primed, I then apply a zenithal highlight using white ink in my airbrush. For the zenithal highlight, I do place the arms temporarily back on where they should fit using blue tack. With the zenithal applied and the guns temporarily fitted back on, the boys are starting to look really nearly done.
Step 8. Paint sub-assemblies. Time to start putting some colour down. I remove the parts blue tacked for the zenithal highlight so that I can paint all of the areas that would be inaccessible when assembled. At this point, I am not caring that much about detail. I mainly want to get the main areas covered, and especially the parts like the chest that will be occluded by the arms and guns when attached. These occluded parts want to be a bit shaded. Step 9. Final assembly. Having done enough to paint hard to reach areas, it is time to stick them all together again, ready for another session of painting to finish it all up. Most of the guns and arms will be plastic to plastic joins, but there are a few that will be plastic to resin. Plastic to resin joins will be obviously using super glue, but I'll use plastic cement for all the others. Step 10. Finish the paint job. We are almost there now, but this stage is the most time consuming. I go over and over all of the minis, painting and painting, working up the layers and adding detail. At some point, short of perfect, but ahead of half done, I call it good enough, and this is what we get. I think they look pretty good and not too typical for regular orcs. They have a uniform look to an extent that makes them feel like they are one unit, but at the same time there is lots of individual variation. The uniformity is appropriate for blood axes as they are perhaps the most professional of the orc clans. But the individual variation should still be there because they are, after all, still orcs and a bit anarchic. Step 11. Varnish. We need to seal the deal by sealing in the paint with a nice coat or two of varnish. I use Vallejo's matte acrylic varnish applied through an airbrush. Job's a good un. In the next video, we will sort these boys out with a truck to get around in. I have a nice forgeable truck that I bagged cheap from eBay. It is already assembled and part painted, so we will have to work out whether or not to paint strip it or just to work on it as it is. But that dilemma, it will have to wait for the next video in the Projekt Mork series. Check out the Projekt Mork playlist for other videos in the series. If you liked this video, then why not subscribe, like, and check out this video here.